Warning: the following podcast, which contains strong language and mature content, is unsuitable for children or for the faint of heart. The subject matter discussed will be frightening and graphic in nature. Listener discretion is advised.
Spooked girls. Spooked girls. When you wanna hear about the paranormal, you get the Spooked Girls. True crime that makes you hypothermal. With the 3 Spooked Girls. Stabby snippets will give you dreams. Tara and Jessica will make you scream along with the Spooked Girls. Bring on the slaughter. We on that haunted ground. The 3 Spooked Girls.
Hey there, Spooksters, and welcome back to another episode here on 3 Spooked Girls. My name is Jessica, and as always, I'm joined by my favorite gal pal, Tara.
Hey, Spooksters. Today
we are doing part 2 of Dance for the Devil, the 7M TikTok cult. It is called The Escape. So before we do that, we should do all the businessy stuff up front that tells you where to find us and all the cool places. So if you want to follow us on social, we are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and Threads. Our handle is at 3 Spooked Girls. If you want to hang out with other like-minded spooksters, we have an amazing Facebook group. In real time, it's Alan's birthday. So happy birthday, Alan.
Happy birthday. Yay. Belated.
For you, belated, but in real time, we're like saying hi.
It's for real today.
We have an amazing group of spooksters over there that kind of interact with each other on the daily, and we get to talk about what's interesting in our lives. We get to talk about true crime headlines pretty quickly, some things that are like funny memes. You know, it's just a good time over there. And if you want to be part of that community, head over. It's 3 Spooked Girls Official on Facebook, of course, because as I keep saying, Facebook is only good for the groups.
Mm-hmm.
I just joined a new group. It's all about cleaning.
Oh.
It's all about how to get stains out of things. And I was like, this is the most millennial thing I've ever done.
Yeah, I am not there yet.
I was like, this is real exciting. I haven't done anything or posted like I need to clean something, but I'm like, oh, I was like, save for later. If you also want to help support the show, you can do so by heading over to patreon.com/3 Spooked Girls or hit the link tree below in the show notes. We have started a new series over there. We are doing Life After Lockup with Gypsy Rose.
Yes.
And I just watched episode 2 a little bit before this because we're going to record it a little bit. And it's just the plot. It thickens.
It does. Shannon and I watched the next episode after.
Ooh.
Because she was watching it with me and I took my notes. And a lot is happening so fast.
I'm so excited. I'm here for it. But if you want to hear that series, because we've on the show, we've done the act. We've actually done the Gypsy Rose case on here. Tara's been following her on her TikTok, like about like different things throughout time, you know, over the years of TikTok. So if you are interested or you want to get like our all tier episode, which is like another bonus one, head over there. $5 and up, get the Gypsy Rose. All tiers for all levels. But definitely check out what we have. We got a lot over there.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, Tara is on TikTok. Her handle is spooky_sleuth. She does true crime headlines. She does just a lot of stuff. She's been doing a partnership with Lifetime. And I'm going to tell you, if you're looking for some movies that are like based on actual events, but are Lifetimey, Tara's got so many recommendations for you. And you definitely want to check those out. So head over to TikTok and follow spooky_sleuth.
Woo.
And with that, let's dive straight into this episode.
Yay. Episode 2. So much trauma happens. Oh my God.
I know. Like I mentioned, it is called The Escape, and it's not the escape you think it is.
No. But I'm very happy for this escape. Like, good for those individuals. So yeah.
For sure, Z. So it starts off with Miranda going live. She's answering questions. Like, someone on the live is like, "Are you in a cult?" And she's like, "No, I'm in a house." And I was like, that's not what that meant.
I'm like, you can be in your house and still be in a cult. So
I was like, this is kind of clever though. Like, it's kind of funny because it's like,
it's the roundabout way because she's not lying in what she's saying.
right. She's like, no, I'm not in a cult. I'm in a house. Are you in a house owned by the cult?
Blink once for yes.
Got to be more specific with your questions, people. It's funny because something that is said in here is that I guess Miranda never had a rebellious stage in her life. And Melanie says that Miranda told Kelly that this is her rebellious, is this whole like M7 thing that her parents don't approve. So this is her rebellious streak. I'm just going to say Robert's not a good guy and you shouldn't be doing your rebellious streak near this kind of guy.
No.
Obviously, Miranda continues to deny that she's in a cult. And the whole religious aspect is really weird to Kelly. Like they mentioned in the first episode, they were Catholic, but they weren't super religious. They didn't go constantly. It wasn't something that was a big part of their life. And then Miranda is now on TikTok Live reading from the Bible, which is really funny because the passage they chose to share is about like heeding the words of your father. And I was like, ma'am.
Irony.
Like I'm tapping the microphone, but not because of your poor ears, guys. Ma'am, you are not heeding the words of your father. You're disobeying what you're reading, but that's fine. So this is like weird to them. So Dean and Kelly are like, look, we have to find her. We have to go and find her. And they do some internet sleuthing. I'm going to tell you, this was like FBI, CIA level sleuthing.
Hell yeah.
Basically, they start looking at her TikToks that are up and they see that like she's like doing a dance in like their backyard and they see this water tower. So they kind of know the area she lives in. So they Google Maps it and they find these two identical water towers that are within like a couple of blocks of each other. And then they just basically drive out there and they try to like line up the angle and they're like driving around just up and down these streets looking. And wouldn't you know that they're out dancing in the streets.
Yep, they find them.
They see Reno first, whose name is Nick, and then they see Miranda. They don't really say what happens in this interaction. They just kind of cuts right here, which was a little disappointing. Movie makers questions what happened during that interaction. But they start talking about like some of the members that we've talked about. We talked like Kevin and Kalia and Kylie and Aubrey. They start referencing articles that have been made public by the New York Post, the Hollywood Reporter, Rolling Stone, all about the Wilking family and their life and how Miranda is this TikTok star who's been taken into this cult, which is basically like a management company / slave labor type situation. Because it kind of like, we'll talk about it later in the episode, they do extort people for money, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It'll give very much the Remnant Life vibe, if y'all remember that.
Yep.
So Andrea Marks is a columnist from Rolling Stone. And basically she goes on to TikTok. Andrea messages all of the main people on 7M, all these main dancers, and not a single one of them get back to her. So then she starts going into the comment section and finding people who are saying things like they knew these dancers or they knew the Shekinah church or they were former members of this. And she starts getting into it. And she realizes this goes back to like 2001. And if you remember at the very end of episode 1, we were introduced to another Melanie, who's Melanie Lee. And she had basically left the church 11 years before this documentary was made. So we're going to get into the Lee family story and how their relationship with the Shekinah church kind of evolves and their relationship with Robert and why Melanie specifically believes that Miranda is in danger. So in 2001, this kind of started. So basically, Melanie is like, I've been out of this church for 11 years. She was focused on her healing by just moving forward. She was, she had been healing and she hadn't had the nightmares and things like that for a very long time. All of a sudden it broke on social media and she's being forced to relive this shit again. That would be really hard to feel like you were moving past something and then it's being forced at you.
Oh, definitely.
But then her first thought is like, where the fuck is my sister? Because now we're going to go into the story. We meet her sister, who is Priscilla Lee. Priscilla had been in the church for about 23 years. She has conflicted feelings about the church. She loves it. She hates it. She is appalled by it and misses it, all kind of wrapped into one. And I totally get this feeling of like, I don't want to like equate it to a breakup per se, but like we've all kind of felt that like breakup when we're like, we know it's over for like it's really good that it's over. But like the way you miss that toxic ex, it's like that is what this cult is. It's her toxic ex. And so she'll go back and listen to like Robert's old sermons and whatnot. And, you know, one of the things that's really hard for her is that Robert spent most of her time there preaching that if you leave Shekinah Church, you will go to hell and be cursed. Because newsflash world, even if you are a Christian right now, if you're like, I go to church every Sunday, I go to Bible study, I am totally like in the Christian lifestyle, you're not going to heaven because you don't go to Shekinah Church. I'm just saying, according to Robert.
Yeah.
Which is not true because the Bible says that there's no way to heaven but through Jesus. Like you can't go through man. And definitely one of the things that the Bible says that totally contradicts their lifestyle, which we talked about in the first one, is that you can save your family by being a good Christian. No, because the Bible says you can't do that. I just like, does he just not talk about, like, does he go, oh, we got to this, like Matthew, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I guess we just won't say this verse. I don't actually know if it's in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, but it's one of the apostles.
One of them.
One of the first 4 in the New Testament. So this, and it was like, she says it was instilled in her because her sister left Shekinah Church that her sister was cursed.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that, like being brainwashed to think like, okay, this person left and is living their life. Like I felt that sometimes, like when people would leave our church, I would be like, they're out of the, because I have heard people like elders of my church say, well, so-and-so left, so they are outside the blessing of God, because they're choosing to walk away from his blessing. And I'm like, that's a lot to like, I don't know, save to someone. And those kind of sound like fighting words.
Yep.
So we find their backstory, which is that the girls were raised in Korea. And one day their dad just like fucking dipped out. And their mom was an alcoholic and they came to the United States. The girl's mom worked nights and then she would come home and drink and go gambling. And she would like leave the girls for like a month at a time by themselves. And Priscilla's the older sister. And I'm not sure by how many years, but Priscilla was a 9th grader. So she was like 14 and she's taking care of her younger sister and whatnot. And, you know, she's just trying to kind of not let her sister go down the path that her mother went down with this like addiction.
Mm-hmm.
So Melanie wasn't actually allowed to make friends at school because Priscilla was completely thinking if you make friends probably in middle school, you're going to get hooked on drugs because all your friends at school are going to give you drugs. Because I will be honest, in the late not like from like the 80s to like the mid 2000s, the Don't Do Drugs campaign was you're just going to get offered free drugs all the time. And I don't know about you, Tara, but I have never just been offered free drugs.
No.
That's not a thing.
No.
There's no, like, maybe I just, looking at you, maybe I just have really bad friends. That's not true. You always share anything that you have with me. So that's not true. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And also I'm a consenting adult.
Right.
But, so I get it. During this time in 2001, Melanie is looking for a place to belong. So she ends up going to Shekinah Church because it's a Korean-based church. And she talks about like, this is where Korean immigrants would go, where they could find community. It's where they would eat like the Korean foods. It's where they would like feel at home. And they said it's kind of an incestuous, cliquey environment where it's like, you all go to the same church and you all hang out together and you marry each other. That's kind of how it was. But for some reason, Priscilla let her have one friend who was not at this church that was from school, and his name is Marquis Richardson, and he will come in clutch later. But I adore this man.
Yeah.
I really hope he's living a good life because, you know, I've been burned so many times when I start liking someone in a documentary and then you find out they're fucking trash in real life. I can't do this again.
Right. Please no.
Jim Hoyt or whatever his name was from when we did Happy Smile or whatever.
Yeah.
So I guess when they started attending this church, it was very small. There was like 15 people. It was like the pastor, his family, the pastor's sister, whose name is Catherine. So it was like Robert and his family, and then Catherine, who is his sister. And they just basically were there with like a few other people. Marquis says he goes to church with her one time because she's like real excited to like share the church. And the way he kind of describes Pastor Robert is that Robert is like imitating a black church. And he's like, it's kind of cute. It's like multicultural and there's a lot of people that, like, not a lot of people there, but it's cute. But he's like, it's not for me, which I'm like, good for you. Good for passing. And Melanie is like, you should really come to this to Priscilla. So Priscilla joins the church. And then we flash forward to 2005. Melanie develops this like weird rash that will not leave. They keep trying to treat it with something. And mind you, like, there's not a lot of people in Melanie. There's not a home, like not a mom that's there to like know how to handle this stuff. So she's not getting taken to the doctor. So they're rubbing alcohol on it, hoping to get rid of this rash. And then they go to Laguna Beach and Melanie gets baptized. And within 2 days, the rash is gone. And it's interesting because like Robert is like, I did that. I healed you through God. I healed you. And Priscilla's like, it might have been the rubbing alcohol plus the sea salt. Just saying. Combination of the two may have exfoliated the rash right off. I'm thinking that's it and not the power of the Almighty. Just saying. But literally, Robert starts preaching to people. And I've heard this in churches. Like I've sat in church services and my dad, being a chiropractor, was like, that's not true. He's like, God has the ability to heal you, but you also should go to the doctor because God made doctors and medicine. So like you should go. Like literally my dad was like, maybe with that broken arm, you should go get it fixed. Robert was like, you don't need to go to a doctor. I can heal you through God. So people were probably dying around Robert. Just like, you aren't saved. And then he starts preaching about hell and that the only way not to go to hell is through Robert. And you have to go to church and that you can save your family. But he would like tell them about like how hell is this like abyss. And like, if you were a bad person, like Priscilla talks about it, like maggots would come out of your skin and then like they would like ooze, your flesh would burn off and then it would like re-heal and start over. And I was like, girl, I understand.
Oh God. Awful.
Here's my trauma dump for the episode. We did Heaven's Gates, Hell's Flames, which if you don't know what that is, it's a play. These people go around the United States and convince local churches to put on to save people. And little tiny freshman Jessica played a girl who was hanging out with a bunch of people drinking. And we died in a car accident. We're trying to race a train because we were drunk. And my ass thought drunk kids just had a lot of eyeliner and only curled like certain strands of their hair and grungy.
Wow.
Yeah, no. 14-year-old Jessica was like, I love Jesus. That's who this is about. But also at school was like so funny because like if kids at church saw me hang out with my friends at school my freshman year, I hung out with kids that were like the stoner kids. Mm-hmm. And I looked like the preppy little princess in my like light baby pink shirts and like knee-length jean skirts and Vans that matched every t-shirt color I had and was like... But I hang out with this guy. Little baby Jessica understood this. But something that I do not understand is they had this thing called Glory Girls. So it was like all these little girls who were in this church would literally live in the same house. And they all were like moving into the same complex. So they had this house. It was called the Glory Girls houses. And they were owned by Catherine and Robert. And you would like live in one of the houses for like 6 months. And then they would move you to a different house. And this kept happening. And it was very much to control them. Mm-hmm. And one of the other things that they did was eventually they separated Priscilla and Melanie.
Right.
Like for a while they were together and then suddenly they were separated and they weren't allowed to talk about being separated or really to each other. So that was kind of weird. I would have thought, hey, let's keep sisters together.
Right.
And it was all for control. Now, the way the church is set up is there's something called spiritual mentors, which is pretty common in churches when you have like a new convert. And it's someone who's supposed to like, you can go to and ask questions. They're there to like kind of shepherd your religious experience into a positive one. But the way that this church worked is that person was your boss, essentially. The church preached that all thoughts were of God or the devil, and you had to tell your spiritual mentor everything, because if you didn't, how are you to know which is which? And then they're to interpret it and tell you how to live your life. Mm-hmm. So you did this. Also, if you didn't do this, other people would tell on you. So like, let's say I was like, ooh, I'm going to go hang out with my non-Shekinah friends. Little Sally down the street would be like, spiritual leader Jessica went and hung out with her non-Shekinah friends. You should look into that. And so basically this whole church is set up to tattle on each other. It is just tattle, tattle, tattle.
Oh, yeah.
And even the 7M people are like, this is how it's still set up today. And this is exactly what happens. Like Kylie is talking about the fact that there were times where she wasn't even comfortable telling Aubrey how she felt about some situations because she wasn't sure if he would tell Robert. And I want to give Aubrey the benefit of the doubt that it was like maybe out of concern, like, hey, she's thinking this way, we might need help. Like I want to give positive, but there was no trust, because then all the spiritual leaders that you confess this to, like, can you imagine being like, hi, today I had a bad thought. I had a thought about stabbing someone, and then they go tell Robert, and then Robert uses it against you. And kind of the foundation of this church is that Robert is the man of God, his wife is the woman of God, and that Catherine is the speaker person of like the women in the church. How you please God and how you honor God is to please his man of God, which is Robert, which is why when we talked about in the last episode, you give 10% to the man of God. So you give 10% to God, which is Robert because he runs the church. And then you give 20% of your income to 7M management. So 40% of your income. God, bye-bye.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Robert.
They have something called the Millionaires Club, which I never really got a full read on it. It just kind of sounds like Robert and like people in his life like talk at you and tell you how to become rich. But here's the kicker. This is how it's like Remnant Life. You don't get to become rich because you have to work essentially for the church's businesses. They owned flower shops, cafes. They were real estate agents and mortgage dealers. And this was all owned by Robert and Catherine. And you got paid minimal. Melanie was talking about the fact that she worked Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And after like all of her whatevers, she only made $100 per week.
That's wild. That's so crazy.
That is literally like labor laws.
So illegal in so many ways.
That I can see someone going to the Department of Labor and being like, they're underpaying they're not even paying minimum wage to people. But we're going to talk about how these people they were even shystier. So Robert would just keep the money. Now, basically what happened is when Priscilla starts working for the mortgage company, she didn't have a bank account. So they're like, start a bank account. And Hannah, who became Robert's wife, was like, okay, I got this to help you because you don't know how to manage your money because, you weren't taught. I'll have full access to your bank account. And then she ordered checks and she made Priscilla sign all of her checks. So like a checkbook just signed. That's deadly.
Just a blank checks. Yeah.
Like, don't like if you signed it, they're gonna be like, well, you signed this check.
Mm-hmm.
Even if the pen, like, even if you like break it down, the penmanship doesn't match like the rest of the check, you still signed your check. And they can't be like, well, maybe she wrote it out for you because you don't know how. So basically what Hannah would do is she would deposit Priscilla's quote unquote paycheck each week or month or whatever. And then she would take one of those pre-signed checks and write it back to herself. So she would leave her like $160 a month or like a week or whatever it was. It was so little. And they would make these withdrawals to pay for the church or give to Robert, or she's like, I paid for someone's Home Depot credit card once. And that's just how it worked. And Robert would preach, the more you give, the bigger you sow, the bigger you reap, which is really good. And we'll end on that a little later. Same thought. But Robert always wanted more money and he wanted to break into Hollywood. And he had this like right-hand man kind of guy. His name was Daniel. And Daniel's not an unattractive person. And it kind of looks like he's been on a couple episodes of like Law and Order-y type shows. Robert also did a couple indie films. They seemed really weird from what we saw. Like this girl was in a cafe and she was in like a princess dress, but the guy was like in normal clothes. And I was like, is this like a spinoff of Enchanted?
Maybe.
Yes. I don't know what's happening. So Daniel was like, who is the spiritual leader of the church, was like going out to become an actor, and it just wasn't happening. And then Chloe, his daughter, wanted to be a singer, and that wasn't happening. And they were like, okay. So then enter the dancers. And now they have their way of breaking in because there's all of these deals that are coming in. And basically Robert would get up on like a Sunday morning and like preach. And he'd be like, Aubrey did a toilet paper commercial. And do you know how much money he made? He made $35,000 or $37,500. And I was like, oh my God, that means he basically got like no money because you think after taxes and then after that. So it was still like a good chunk, but like
not what he should have got. Yeah.
Yeah. Robert was getting a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
People wanted him to call them out and be like, this is what he did, blah, blah, blah. And then also the other thing he would do from the pulpit is he would call out people who weren't. So he'd be like, Tara, you're not doing anything. Why aren't you performing? And then people would be like, oh no, I'm getting chastised. But then also it's like you wanted to be one of the two. You wanted to either be the getting praise or chastised. Because if you were being chastised, because Robert believes that there's no such thing as bad publicity. If they're not talking about you, you're not relevant. And that's what they thought. Like if I'm not getting yelled at or if I'm not getting praise, I'm not relevant in Robert's world and I need to be relevant in Robert's world. Basically, Robert created a system where if Robert wasn't happy, God wasn't happy. And that the only way to make Robert happy was to fight for his attention. Now, Robert starts to have the internal panic, which we talked about, because of the fact that those articles came out after that video, and that just put him in a bad spotlight. According to the former members of 7M, suddenly deals, like they had a deal with the Clippers, it went away. They lost deals. People didn't want to work with them because people, there are companies out there who are like, I don't want to be caught up in like a labor scheme.
Yeah.
Like that's not a good look for us. So, they lost a lot of it. And Robert got cranky and he started rebuking people from the pulpit. And not in a good way, but like entities and the Wilkins and just people like that. In May of 2022, Daniel, who we just previously mentioned, and Chloe, who, by the way, are an item, leave the church. A bunch of people start leaving the church. And Robert from the pulpit says, who gives a F? Nobody's going to remember you. This is his own child.
Right? What the fuck? Like, he only cared about himself. Let's just put that out there.
Very true. And it's like when your right-hand man, like the person, and Daniel had been there for like 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
He'd been there since he was like very, very young. So we're talking like single digits, like child, all the way into adulthood. And then his daughter left. And then because of this, some of the 7M performers start leaving because of the allegations. And they do quote, like they'll go on their they were like on TikTok lives and they're like, yes, I left. I'm no longer part of 7M. I'm not here for those allegations, blah, blah, blah. This is not me. And they'd kind of all talked about it and they thought everyone was going to walk out together. And it turned out only half of them left. So there was like that core group that was still there. So like James Derrick is still there. Obviously, Miranda is still there because they're together. Reno or Nick is still there. And Melanie Wilking was like, why isn't Miranda coming out? This is also the same thought of like Nick's parents. They were like, why isn't he here? They basically were trying to reach out to him. And like his mom would like send him pictures of like him as a kid and be like, remember this?
Oh my God, so sad.
And try to do it in a way that wasn't overwhelming.
Right.
To him. And I'm like, that's really smart, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But on January 23rd of, I believe, 2022 or 2023, one of the two, it just started showing green messages. So everything they were sending was blocked. And they were like, oh, great. My son has blocked me, but they kept trying. They came out to LA and they went to his house every night and was like knocking on the door. It was so cute. The dad was like throwing pebbles on his window. Like,
oh my gosh, yeah.
And they like kept saying to him, we're coming back every night. We're coming back every single night. Like, we're going to be here. And Robert was like, they're attacking us. These parents are coming out here and attacking us. But he needed to figure out a way to like fix this. So he's like, I know what we'll do. We need you to cut them out of your lives without them even realizing that you're cutting them out of their lives. And so they're like, you guys need to get in touch with your family again. So Nick sent his mom a text message that just said like 12:30 Panda Express. Here's the address. So they were like, we're there. And they go and they like hug. And you can see that he's actually really happy to see his parents. It's not like he was like, oh my God, I hate my parents and I'm here and I'm being like grumpy. But they could also tell that like, he didn't look right. Like he wasn't being nourished right. Like he looked like he wasn't being taken care of. And, his parents are like, they're like, I don't know what to do because you have to kind of be strategic about it. And Miranda does the same thing with her family. And they get in contact and everything like that. And Kelly and Dean start in on like, we don't think Robert's a good guy. We really think that you need to like get away from them. And Miranda, I know we talk a lot about this, like setting boundaries. She does. She sets a boundary and says, look, if you want a relationship with me, we're not talking about Robert in the church, in the management club or management gig. You and I, we can have a relationship. We just don't talk about this. And Kelly and Dean are like, okay. So they're like, we just want her back in our family. And they give in to this request of Miranda's. Melanie Wilking starts talking about the fact that everything seems like very public. Like every chance Miranda gets, she's like posting pictures with her family. Because I went and looked on TikTok and it's like there's hella videos with her family and there's pictures on, like I went to her Instagram and her Instagram has hella pictures with her family. And I'm like, okay, like I was confused before I watched this. So I was like, so is it over? Like, I don't know how to feel. But this episode made sense that like they're in each other's lives because this is what Robert wants, because I think what Melanie Lee will say later, Robert has figured out as long as they get to see her, they're quiet. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. Basically, Melanie Wilking is like, I keep my personal life to myself. Like, she's engaged to a guy. They're super cute and they're so adorable together.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that since then they've gotten married because I saw that on Miranda's TikTok. They were like, I think her mom and her were like dancing at like the wedding venue or something. But she doesn't tell Miranda anything. She says that we don't really have a relationship, at least at this point in the documentary as it's unfolding. So the Wilking family and Miranda Lee or Melanie Lee sit down to have like dinner and talk because they contacted each other. And she goes, look, do you talk to her about your deals? Like Melanie asked Melanie. And she goes, no. And she goes, and you don't bring up Robert. And Melanie Wilking goes, if you bring up Robert to her, she immediately starts screaming. So it's like a hairpin trigger now. And she's like, she's playing a game. And they're like, we're going to play the game because we get to see her. And this is where Melanie Lee goes, I completely disagree with this. I think you need to keep pushing the button because you're the one driving the meter. Because look what happened when you guys started talking. And this is where she says, Robert figured out to keep you guys from going public and keep you quiet. You just need to see Miranda. And I kind of think that's why this documentary is still being made.
Oh,
because
yeah.
I could have seen how easily it would be at this point for them to walk away and not do it because Miranda is in their life. And then she says, Miranda's just not safe around Robert. And now we're going to get into some heavy stuff. So I'm just going to say, if you get triggered by anything like SA or non-consensual, any kind of that, non-consensual touching, anything of that nature, this next part might not be for you. So it's 2008 and Robert is up on stage and he is about to make an announcement about something. Everyone's really happy. And then all of a sudden the church doors open and like a half a dozen young girls come running in. And I don't know how young. I'm thinking they're young ladies.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like 18, 19. When I say late teens, like adults. And they come in and they start screaming and crying. And it is actually described as wailing. And they yell that Robert has sexually assaulted them and that this was done under the pretense that he was soliciting sexual favors from them because he was promising them that they would be his wife. And that's a big thing. Like in the church, like purity is a big thing. I had 2 purity rings, not for the obvious, like, oh, she wasn't pure and then she like rededicated. I just lost my first one. Like physically it slipped off my hand. But I had 2 purity rings and it was a big thing. Like at my church, there was a thing where like you would like you would say, we did it in youth group. It was like, I vow to save myself for marriage. And I got this little pearl that was like in a little box. And like, it was supposed to be like, pearls are precious. And they're like, you can only open a clam. This is so gross. You can only open a clam once to get the pearl. And the pearl is the prize. My virginity was the prize for my husband. It sounds so fucked up. Like,
yeah, a little bit.
Which is actually kind of funny because like a clam is another name for a vagina, like in a crude sense, but like also to be like, hey, 14-year-old girl, your vagina is a clam and you can't open it until your husband gets your pearl. And I'm like, that's real gross.
Not a fan.
Brainwashed teenage Jessica was all about that damn pearl. It sat like on her dresser. And I looked at it every day and I was like, I'm going to save myself for marriage and I'm going to spoiler it. I didn't.
Well, no, but
I was doing very naughty things at a very early age and not telling people about it because, why not? But basically, Robert was like promising them to be his wife and be the woman of God, which is like, it goes God, man of God, woman of God, speaker. But Hannah, who was to be his wife, had already been like chosen and they had actually like already become engaged, which was the announcement he was going to make, which is why they were like, I must yell at you. Catherine, his sister, flips the fuck out and is like, I'm taking these girls and leaving the church. And he literally does. And basically calls Robert out for not being a man of God. And Robert does something that's so out of pocket for this dude. he basically owns his own shit. Mind you, he starts it off by saying, look, I was seduced by these women. So putting the blame on the women, not on him. And that he is just a human and a man and he has temptation and that he's so sorry. And apparently it was so soft spoken that people were like, okay, we forgive you. But also me over here like,
yeah.
sir, stop saying that this 20-year-old was like, Pastor, come here to my womanly wiles. Like, I'm pretty sure that wasn't her idea, especially because it like gives Dan Schneider vibes with it starts with massages. And people were like, he has humbled himself and he's asking for forgiveness, so we should forgive him. Because actually infidelity is a big thing amongst pastors of churches. In my 21 years of life in that church, I want to say three pastors had infidelity issues. One my parents were super involved with because like basically the pastor's wife called my dad and was like, he's leaving me for the secretary. If you are from Corning, I'm blowing your minds, guys. And if you DM me, I will tell you who. And my parents literally got us out of bed in the middle of the night and drove over to the pastor's house to have an intervention. I was sleeping in the pastor's guest room. The pastor's wife came in to check on me. Like my own parents weren't even coming in to check on me, but like literally to stop him from like running away with the church secretary. Super scandal.
All the scandal. Oh my God.
And then another one was like this woman would like come sit on the pastor's lap and have lunch with him. And they would pretend like that was a normal thing.
What the fuck?
These are two different pastors, mind you, but they were like pretty close in succession. And then there was another one. I can't really remember what happened there, but it was,
wow.
I was just like, oh my God. Pastors like fail real big at infidelity. And I don't know why. It's just not hard to not sleep with people. Super easy. Just don't do it. And if you have feelings for someone else outside of your marriage, leave your marriage. Or talk to your spouse. All options. Figure it out. You're adults if you're married, I hope. That's a whole other crime. So most of the girls left, by the way, which I'm like, thank God. Abusers don't need to be around their abusees. But Melanie is suddenly now in Robert's good graces, Melanie Lee. And she's invited to go to Robert's house for like some Robert time. I don't know how else to say that. And Robert is like, hey, I'm just going to basically paraphrase. It was like, hey, I like you. I think we should kind of hook up and be together and you should give me massages and everyone has to pay their price. And this is your price. And I am like King David and I could have mistresses. So yeah, that's disgusting.
So gross.
So that starts happening in like 2008, 2009. And basically she doesn't tell anyone until one day she breaks down and tells Marquis, her friend from outside the church, which thank God for Marquis.
Yeah.
And being outside the church. And he is like immediately like, you getting the fuck out. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You're getting the fuck out. So they pick a date and they're like, okay, I'm going to like, so let's say it was like Monday, right? And they're like, not this Thursday, but the next Thursday, I'm going to come get you. People are going to leave. I'm going to pull up. I'm going to get you. So they had this whole thing happen. And the plan was they were going to do that. And then they were going to go over and basically kind of kidnap
Right. Mm-hmm.
Priscilla, because they were living in separate houses. They were going to go be like, do you want to come with us? And if she said no, they were going to just take her. Which I was like, I don't condone kidnapping, but this kind of seems like a good, like a good kind of kidnap.
Yes.
Because you kind of kidnap someone outside of a cult and release them into the wild.
Right.
Maybe into a therapist's office. Just directly. Here you go. So they had this all set up. And then Robert calls her and is like, hey, so I have this fabulous idea. I think you should sleep with this other member of the church. And she asks him, like, how many days do I have to think about this? And he goes, how many do you need to think about it? And she goes, 10, because that puts her past like the 10 mark. She'd be gone by then, right? So she could just like turn off her phone and whatever. And he goes, no, you have 3 days. So she calls Marquis and is like, dude, gots to go now. So come pick me up. We're going. And he basically comes the next day. He shows up with... I just love this. He shows up with a van and a bat. And they interview him and he goes, I didn't know what I was going to do with the bat. I just had it. And I was like, I kind of know what you were doing. You were just going to swing for some Christians. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
And so the people leave. He pulls up. They start loading the van. He's standing outside. And then this car pulls up in front of the driveway where the van is. And so they can't get out. And Marquis is like, get the fuck out of the way. And for some magical reason, they just move.
Yeah, thankfully.
Marquis drives away. They call Priscilla and they're like, hey, because at this point in time, they know that Robert knows this is happening because that person is definitely called Robert and is like, Melanie's leaving. So Melanie or Priscilla has probably already been alerted that her sister is trying to run away. And she's like, come with us. And she's like, I'm not going to go. And basically, Melanie leaves and doesn't talk to her sister for 11 years. Robert tells Priscilla that Melanie is cursed. And in a quote from a sermon, he goes, or she says, you're the only one who can save your sister from going to hell because she wronged me. What a petty bitch. But I mean, what do I expect? It's Robert.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, like in many cults and crazy things, Priscilla ends up taking Melanie's place as mistress. And she says she hated it, but she did it to save her family. She thought about killing herself, but she said, I did not kill myself because I wanted to ensure the salvation of my life and my direct families, which again, not how it works. According to their own book, their own bylaws, so to speak. It's not how it works. Robert basically would like come to visit her and she would get like, when he would come to visit her, she would like get sick, like nausea. She'd get like that acid reflux. And Robert said that spending time with him was purifying her body. And so she was getting sick because the evil was leaving her body, which then fucked up her psyche because then it was like, well, I must be really evil because this demon doesn't seem to want, like, I have all these demons. That's literally what she said. She thought she had a bunch of demons and it would just be this cycle. And this goes on like this for 10 years. And it basically got to the point where like she had double curtains in her room. She was like in the dark all the time. She was so depressed. She would print out giant like scripture verses. Like when I say giant scripture verses, not like a really long one, but she'd like make them really big and she'd put them all on her wall. She was just in her room. And then one day, Hannah just shows up and goes completely crazy and starts ripping things down and like beating Priscilla. And Priscilla just is thinking like, please let this end. Please let this end. Please let this end. You know, she just wants it to be done. And then Robert comes over and like knocks in and is like, let me in. And then he comes in and basically tells Priscilla, well, you know, nothing Hannah did was wrong. Though Hannah destroyed your shit and is like physically harming you, she's fine. This is the moment where Priscilla is like, I would rather go to hell than live this way any longer. She packed up her shit and left. And it took her a few months, but then she finally saw Melanie. And Melanie was hesitant at first when this was happening because she didn't know what state she was in. Because like, can she trust her? Is this a way to like get Melanie back into the fold? Like there's a lot of layers to this that like, will I reconnect with my sister? And then will she turn around and run away again? The first time Robert is like, I'll take you back. Like she doesn't know if Robert ousted her. There's a lot to it. So she doesn't know who to trust. And she says like the battle is in their mind and it's even more terrifying when they're alone. And like, what if she relapses and go back in? And like, basically Priscilla's like, where do I go from here? You know, like, what do I do? There's like one point in time where like Priscilla like basically talks about like she has contemplating like unaliving herself. She's like trying really hard. And the thing is that she wants justice. She wants to be able to bring justice against Robert. And if it is as close to, like if this was happening for 10 years and she left in 2022, statute of limitations is still wide open. And she could go in and say like, this was happening to me for 10 years. Yes, I'm an adult, but like this is happening to me. And I think at this point, people will fucking believe her because Robert does not have the greatest, like he is seen as like a cult leader. And as we've mentioned before, cult leaders like to sexually abuse people, and especially in a manipulative way where they don't actually think they're being abused. And that kind of like ends the episode and we wrap it up. It kind of ends with Priscilla acknowledging the fact that Robert needs to reap what he sowed. And remember the beginning where he says, if you sow big, you reap big. And Robert's been out here reaping or been sowing a lot of big shit out there. And it's time for karma to smack him in the face. So we will be back next time with the final episode or the final installment of this one. I don't know. I haven't watched it yet, so I don't know how it's going to end, but we will find out next time. Toodles.
Bye.